Hello and welcome. My name is Kimberly Grymes and I am a self-published author, and this is From Ideas to Pages to Publishing, a podcast where I'll be documenting my writing and publishing progress and sharing tips and tricks of the trade that I've picked up from others in the publishing industry. When it comes to my personal author experience, you can expect me to share the good, the bad, my wins, and the days I sit in the corner all curled up and crying. Before I jump in and give you a quick writing update, I want to remind listeners that From Ideas to Pages to Publishing now has a writing support group on Patreon. We meet once a month to cheer each other on as we work to reach our writing and author business goals. So if you're interested in a writing group focused on project accountability and motivation to keep moving forward on your writing and author business goals, then check out From Ideas to Pages to Publishing, the Patreon group. Welcome to episode 13. Super quick project update. Book 3, Shades and Blood Oaths in my YA Dark Fantasy 3 Shades trilogy is still with the line editor. The 3 Shades trilogy Kickstarter update. Today is June 20th, and that means we're 89 days away from launch day. There really isn't too much to add for the Kickstarter update. I've been working on the annotated edition of Shade of Light in my free time. Okay, the Prairie Land Romantasy update. I'm pretty excited about this story. Last week, I sent chapter 1 to my book coach, Connolly, for feedback. And the other day, we had our monthly video chat meeting to discuss the opening scenes. Overall, her feedback was a positive one. She enjoyed the humor in the opening paragraph and how I decided to introduce the female main character and her immediate surroundings, which included some world building, but mostly close proximity kind of setting details. I think there were only a few small details that I needed to go back in and fix, so nothing major, which was really great because I didn't want to do a major overhaul. But I would have if I had to. I am going to have to pay close attention to every line throughout this story because I've created this main character with kind of a complex personality / backstory, meaning there's a lot of behaviors and ways of thinking that are embedded in how she responds and speaks, yet at the same time, she's in a new environment that contradicts everything she knows. I'm definitely going to have to go back into my brainstorming and outlining notes for her character arc and make sure everything transitions smoothly. Okay, so that's my Prairie Land Romantasy update. I'm going to move on to writing chapters 2 and 3 and then meet back with Connolly next month. The Secret Author Collab project, yep, you guessed it, is still a secret. I can tell you that I've written the first chapter for this story. There's certain things that go into a chapter 1, in my opinion, and I'm going to get into that in just a little bit. But for this story, I wanted to start the story off with a heartache, not a broken heart caused by someone, but rather by losing something. I also introduced the fantasy element of this story world, whereas in the Prairie Land Romantasy, the fantasy element isn't seen until chapter 2. So hopefully I can update you more on the Secret Author Collab project soon. I will keep you posted. And the last update I have for you, which really isn't a writing project update, more of an author business project update, is the merger of my author website from WordPress with my author shop, which is currently with PayHip, and my author newsletter, which is currently being hosted by Substack. If you recall, the debacle I recently had with Substack, which I shared in my last episode, where they shut down my page because of phishing or spam. Thank goodness it's all resolved and everything is back to normal. But because of the incident, I've moved up my timetable for merging all of these sites into one. I just wanted to update you that I am still working on building the Shopify page. I'm hoping to work on it more this upcoming week because I really need to get that up and running since I've entered the first month of that discounted 3-month stage. $1 per month for the first 3 months. Operations and the design of it all is getting easier and more familiar. It's more about figuring out the image dimensions that's kind of annoying me, but I'll figure it out. I want to make sure the image quality looks good no matter what device someone opens the page on. Okay, so for this week, since I'd finished writing both chapter 1s for my Prairieland Romantasy and for the author collab Romantasy story, I thought I would talk about my process when starting to draft, transitioning from the brainstorming and outlining stage to the writing the first draft stage. Well, actually, I call this stage the zero draft stage. And that's because after I do all of my self edits and it's ready to go to beta readers or critique partners or my book coach, I like the manuscript to be as polished as possible. So I'll write, then rewrite, and then rewrite again, and maybe even again until I got something I really, really like. And then I'll leave it alone for a day or two while I work on the next chapter. And then I'll go back and do self edits. But when writing chapter 1, I don't normally go on and write that next chapter. I need to know that chapter 1 is solid before I move forward. So instead of writing the next 2 chapters, 2 and 3 chapters, whatever, I'll usually let chapter 1 sit and then go do something else. In this case, I worked on chapter 1 for the author collab project. Anyways, there's a lot of rewriting and self-editing, and generally it takes me about 1 to 2 days to write 1 chapter. And if I'm on a roll, then I can bang out at least 2 to 3 chapters a week. Okay, but now I kind of want to talk about just chapter 1, the opening scenes of a book. Now, the main ingredients should be the same across the board when it comes to different genres of fiction: fantasy, romance, mystery, historical fiction, whatever. I really think if you have these 5 ingredients I'm going to talk about, then you'll have a good foundation for your readers to connect with your story and your characters. Let's start with the first one, your opening line. Your opening line needs to draw readers into the story and make them want to read more. You know when something peculiar happens and you stare at it like whatever it is and you ask yourself, well, how did that happen? Or that feeling you get when you're rushing to get somewhere because you don't want to be late. You know, those feelings, those questions that drive you forward into wanting to know more or anticipating what will happen, those are the things that you want to start a story off with. Create an opening line that focuses around something that needs an answer or a result. It can be a small scenario or part of the main plot story, but hint at some kind of conflict. Just a hint, a teaser, if you will. Don't rant on or dive into backstory about the conflict. Just open the story with a character, usually the main character, facing or addressing something. Don't start the story out with them living their everyday life unless you are planning to upend that everyday life in a major way. Then really emphasize how good life is, like over the top emphasize. And remember, this is just all my opinion. Every writer out there has their own ideas about how to write a story. But I really feel like you open a story with some kind of teaser conflict. Okay, moving on. Number 2, establish setting early on, like early as in the second paragraph. Don't dwell too much on the internal dialogue or the action right off the bat. The reader needs to start visualizing where the story is taking place. Give them something familiar before you jump into any made-up story world details. Rolling plains, desert land, choppy waters on the sea, something that will ground them as they continue reading. There's going to be a lot of information being shared in this opening chapter, and you want to make it easy for them to retain the important stuff so they can start to connect and get lost in your story. Right now, their brain is trying to imagine the story world you've created. And if you're overwhelming the reader early on, they'll never be able to follow your story. And that's how your book gets DNF'd. So, setting, second paragraph, or close to the opening hook line, and make it familiar. Once that familiar setting has been established, you can build on the setting details, sprinkling in throughout your story. Number 3, conflict. Now, your opening line, remember, was the teaser about the conflict, giving the reader a moment to ground themselves with the character voice and the setting. And now you can return to whatever's happening in that moment, whatever emotional state the character is in, whatever conflict, small or large, they're facing. Intertwining this conflict, you'll start to establish your main character's personality and voice, who they are, what their current life circumstances are, and what they desire. Of course, you can throw in other things to help the reader understand them a little bit better. Are they out for revenge? Are they there trying to survive an apocalyptic world? Are they grieving? Are they excited about a college acceptance letter they've yet to open? Whatever it is, use this time to establish your character's initial behaviors and reactions. This is the start of their character arc. Conflict and character behaviors go hand in hand. The conflict in the opening scenes can either be small and resolved fairly quickly, but still have to do with the larger story plot by showing how the character handles certain situations at the beginning of their arc. Or you can have the conflict be related to the bigger story problem, like in a dystopian story. Maybe the overseeing government power is causing problems for the main character and their family, which later will have them taking down the entity that's causing the family problems they're facing in Chapter 1. Whatever the conflict is in your opening chapter, use it to show the reader who your main character is at the beginning of the story. Number 4. Somewhere in Chapter 1, you have to mention your main character's name. The reader needs to know who they're connecting with. And yes, you mentioned the name in the blurb, but don't count on the reader remembering the name from that. A name is a powerful thing in a story. It's more powerful than the color of their eyes or the accent of their voice. A character's name is tethered to a story by their actions and their connections to the other characters. It's also why you should not have too many characters with the same first letter or sounding letters. Phil, Fiona, Ferris. If you do name your characters with similar sounding names, make sure they have something else to distinguish them from the other characters. Okay, and last, number 5. It's recommended that you have some form of element in your Chapter 1 that ties the story to the genre. If you're writing a mystery, you might want to have a murder or something go missing. If you're writing a romance, show some form of love, breakup, or anything that has to do with something you find in a romance story. The main character just got home from a date, good or bad date, you decide. Or maybe they've sworn off love until they can get their affairs in order, except they just ran into an old high school crush, and now their whole plans to focus on their professional career is out the window. Or if you're writing fantasy or science fiction, depending on what the subgenre is, show some kind of fantasy or science fiction element in your first chapter, whether it be through the world building or through the magic system or through some kind of tech. You know your story and whether you want to introduce the reader to the world of magic right away, or if you want to show a hint of it in a foretelling kind of way. But you have to have something to help the reader form that story world in their mind. For me, for my Prairieland Romantasy, I've made the decision to focus more on the romance story in Chapter 1 and then introduce the fantasy element in Chapter 2. And I did talk to my book coach, Connolly, about this, and I was a little concerned because I know how important it is to have that genre element in your opening chapter. But because this is a romantasy, and I'm bringing some of the romance elements to that Chapter 1, and because the fantasy element it's not a high fantasy element, it's more of a subtle fantasy element, that I can introduce it in Chapter 2. Okay, jumping back to the list. Now, with all 5 of those pieces, your opening line, establishing the setting, introducing conflict, your main character's name, and showing some sort of genre element, think of it as a blank canvas, and you're giving the reader these puzzle pieces. Now, they may not be able to see the full finished puzzle image at this point, but giving them these pieces allows them to start visualizing the story in their mind. And as you give them more pieces to visualize, the story world comes together. And then when the pieces start to interlock, That's when your reader will get lost in your story, and that's where you want to hold them in your story. So, with all of this in mind, this is why I tend to spend a lot of time writing my chapter ones. I want to make sure I've checked off each of these ingredients and make sure everything is solid and reads smooth before moving on to chapter 2. So, again, that's all my opinion. Everybody can write however they want. If you think that chapter 1 should include other elements, that is up to you. It's your story. But I'd also love to hear from you. So make sure you comment and share what kind of elements or details that you think should be in a chapter 1. Talking about chapter 1 ingredients is one of the many writing and authoring tips you can find in my 4-week story prep workbook. Not to do kind of a self plug-in here, but this workbook was my way of sharing some of the things I've learned over the years that have helped me write better and faster. It's not only a workbook to brainstorm and outline your story, but it's also packed full of tips and reminders for any level of writer. I know I need subtle reminders like this chapter 1 checklist when I start writing a story. So if you're looking for a comprehensive workbook that will help you plan out your novel and give you tips and tricks to help you remember things along the way, then check out my 4-week story prep workbook for fiction writers. That's all for episode 13. I'll be back next week with more updates and more experiences to share. Until next time, thank you for listening from Ideas to Pages to Publishing with me, Kimberly Grymes. For more information about me, my books, and my author shop, visit kimberlygrymes.com/links.